All right, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Showverse. Today, I have a very, very special guest with me in the face of Andres Veiel, who is the writer and director of the very, very spectacular documentary Riefenstahl, which details the story of Leni Riefenstahl, who is a very controversial figure in 1930s and 40s Germany, as she was the orchestrator behind the greatest propaganda film of all time, Triumphs of the Will. Andres, thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Now Lenny has been a figure of controversy ever since the war ended back in 1945. And uh, upon those controversies was her consistent denial that she had no idea what was going on. But what made her such a uniquely controversial figure is that she is, to this day, still regarded as one of the greatest filmmakers to ever grace the European stage. Now, I am wondering, from your perspective anyway, what drew you to her story? What made you want to make this documentary?
First of all, we got access to her archive, to her estate, and this was a gift. You have just imagined 700 boxes full of photos, films, uh, private films, for example. She and her husband, they documented everything till the last moments close to her death. He held the camera and filmed her. So it was a chance to look in a new way on her life. What does it mean for today? And who is Leni Riefenstahl? A very simple but very important question. What is so interesting? First of all, the lies and legends. She always rewrote in a way her life and how she was involved. No, I was only an artist. I was never interested in politics. That was one thing. But on the other hand, she's a prototype of fascism. And that's interesting, even for today, to know how people develop this longing for authorities, a longing for simple solutions, a longing for aesthetics, celebrating the strongest, the nation, the supremacy of a specific race. So it's not only a film on a controversial filmmaker. It's also a film for me, like you can call it like a warning out of the future, how easily you get seduced, how easily you follow, well, the sugar lane of a leader like the Führer Adolf Hitler.
And that's actually very interesting that you bring that up because, if you take a look at her life back in the 1930s, her work, and then, you see the aftermath of it and how she's like, hey, I had nothing. I was just an artist. I didn't know it was this, but then you see her stretching the goalpost. Well, I didn't know it was that. And then you compare that to, let's just say, certain goings-ons in the world today, and you see that the statement of those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat itself. You are right. This is very much a blueprint as to what can happen again. And what I found so fascinating about your work here is, by all accounts, the unreleased, audio logs, these phone calls, the video that her and her partner Horst took. It does lend itself to more light and more information on a person that we previously had no real understanding of. So going into that, you were given access to her state and into her archive. Now, this film is just a little under 2 hours long, but Lord knows how much stuff you guys actually had to, go through. So, how long did it take for you and your team to actually go through that process of sorting out all of these files, photos, videos, and audio logs?
It was really challenging journey, I can tell you frankly, because we started in 2018, three archive researchers to go to sift through 150,000 photos and a huge, you mentioned it, a huge archive of audio tapes. She taped all phone calls with a lot of fans of her. She had a talk show, and then she got through, I think, something like 5,000 letters and hours of phone calls, and she kept it everything in her archive. So we had to sift through all these things, and it took us, when you asked concretely, it took us 18 months of editing, three editors in three editing rooms. So I just jumped from one to the other. And it was a very strong journey because in the beginning I thought, okay, I knew she lied a lot. She created legends. She rewrote her story. But then the interesting, challenging point for us was she delivers all the contradictions of her lies. It's by herself. It was not me delivering comments. Listen, dear spectator, this is dangerous because it's a lie. No, she herself just contradicts all her stories. And so the archive, the well, it was a gift. In fact, it was a gift for us just to work with all these different findings and to edit it, to assemble it in this long process.
But I can't imagine what, going through that archive must have been like. As you said, it was a gift. And, considering you are a very well-renowned documentary filmmaker, I'm guessing it must have been like, kids on Christmas. You're just like going through documents here, photos there. And you also brought up, you yourself, you were essentially just holding up the window saying, okay, look, this is what she said. This is not me. This is not me trying to paint a picture. This is literally what she's saying. And if you watch the documentary, you will find that she does in fact contradict herself quite a bit, whether it was known then or known now. So I guess my next question for you would be, what was something while you were doing your research that you found that actually just made you shocked to your core or even surprised because you previously just couldn't fathom or even think of something so absurd?
Yeah, well, the one of the challenging moment was in fact a letter in the context of Konski. Konski was a place in Poland. It was part of a Polish campaign. She was there in 1939 in September as a war correspondent. And she wanted to film Hitler. She wanted to film the courageous German army attacking Poland. But then she was an eyewitness of the first massacre. And we found a letter of an adjutant, and he told another story that she was not only an eyewitness of the first massacre of you could watch it like murdering 22 Jews. She was even a catalyst of this massacre. Why? Because she gave a stage direction, and she said, Jews out of the image. There were Jews digging in a grave for the German soldiers. They were hidden with sticks and in a way tortured. And she wanted to film just the courageous German soldiers, and the dirty Jews had to get off. And by shouting these commands, suddenly some of the soldiers shot. And then the other soldiers shot, and it was one of the first massacres. And for me, suddenly I could understand if her involvement in the guilt of this massacre is much deeper. Then she had to deny all her responsibilities because she's much more guilty. And that's something for me which I love to discover, because it's like when I call it, she's a prototype of fascism. You can see how she was torn in and how she was seduced to all the the ideology of the strongness, not only of the German people, but the German soldiers. And then she's also responsible for the dark side of these aesthetics, meaning the contempt of the weakness, meaning the contempt of the Jews, of the others, of the so-called unhealthy people. And we are part of a journey looking into this dark side of her life, and meaning being co-responsible for the killing of 22 Jews in 1939, and that was a discovery.
And speaking as a Jewish man himself, learning, I will admit, because I'd like to be a filmmaker too at one point. That's kind of been my passion. And I remember going to film school and learning only a little bit about her because every good filmmaker needs to learn about Birth of a Nation as well as Triumph of the Wills, as they are very, very important to how we view film as well as the techniques that are still being used today. So when, you know, before watching your documentary, I have made sure to watch um, Triumphs of the Wills again, which, putting aside all that baggage, it is still expertly shot, expertly edited. It is, from an objective standpoint, a phenomenal film. So to learn that she was involved in one of the first massacres of the war, it does leave, at least me, very conflicted on how I should be viewing her. Because on one hand, she could very well be one of the most evil women of the 20th century. But on the other hand, her skills as a filmmaker, I believe, should at least be somewhat studied. But pushing that aside, I do agree. Learning about that was definitely something that, as a viewer, I was completely, I'm not even sure bewildered is the right word, but I was definitely shocked, to say the least. And to hear you say the same thing, only amounts to the kind of work, both artistically and historically, that Leni had as a person. But moseying along here, I'd like to know, you have made countless, countless documentaries before. Now, with this one in particular, this is not the first time you've tackled Nazism in its form, whether it be Neo or Primal. So I am wondering, how did this specific subject and this specific film compare to some of your previous works, such as Addicted to Acting, Loving Highsmith and Boys?
Well, I tell you frankly, it's Riefenstahl has a very personal backstory because I also grew up with lies and legends in my family. So it's not just a film I do on a very controversial German filmmaker. It's also a question on myself. My grandfather was a general in war, in the Russian war, and I always learned he was somehow involved in the resistance movement of the 20th July in Germany. They tried to kill Hitler. They were not successful. And during my work of Riefenstahl, when I started it, I had to learn it was a legend. He was not really involved. He was, on the contrary, he was a traitor because he informed the Gestapo, the secret police in Germany, of one of the collaborators of this resistance movement. And that was very hard for me. So I thought, let's go into it, why people create legends, how they are involved in a regime, what is the background becoming a prototype of fascism, what kind of yearnings and longings do these people have. And so when you compare it to my other films, there was always a personal involvement or necessity, but in Riefenstahl, it's even stronger because of my own legends in my family. But all these films I did before have something to do with an inner necessity. I follow up the traces of violence, of political violence, historical violence, And in the case of Joseph Beuys, an artist, he was part of the Second World War, and he tries somehow to deal on another level with his guilt by transforming the trauma. Even I won't call it a trauma of a perpetrator, but of course he was responsible also for being a supporter of the system. He was part of the Nazi regime, but he tried to escape into art and to deal with it by art. And Riefenstahl is, in a way, the opposite. She tried to escape into her lies and legends. So when you ask me about my work, I'm always encircling the same wound in a way as somebody who is really involved in the German past by my father, my grandfather, and so I have to deal with it. There's no way of escape, and that's why I I must do these films. You know, it's not just something uh, somebody asked me to do it. No, and there's a very deep wound of my in myself regarding myself.
So through that perspective, not only is this film personal to you, but as a German man, this figure and this, I guess, legend, as we can at least somewhat put it, this, oh man, sorry, I'm a little taken aback by your words. But you know, I can't imagine what Lenny's story must mean to you in that personal way because you have this background. I feel like every native born German has this sort of past that they always not want necessarily say run from, but it's through a lens that you have to look at. So
It was somehow we have a strange internet connection here in the hotel.
oh, do not worry. It's hotel Wi-Fi. It's only one of two things. It's either really, really good or really, really bad. Unfortunately, there
Yeah.
is no in between.
Yeah. No, what I wanted to say, I'm very grateful for meeting you because it's on a very personal level. I think it's the necessity to talk about these wounds, and I consider you also being wounded much more. Maybe you lost grandfather or grandmother, I don't know, but there's a background in your story, I think, and so it's even more necessary to find some more way of exchange and encounter. Yeah.
It's I from what I was able to gather on my Jewish side of the family, um, I it's so my great grandmother lived in Eastern Europe. Uh, as she was born in 1899, and she watched the rise of the Bolsheviks and the rise of Nazism. And by 19, I think was September 1932. She and her then husband looked on both sides, both in the East and the West, and they just went, "Yeah, no, we're not. We're getting out of here. This is not like we can see the sunrise coming." And unfortunately, it's going to be a red one at that. So they got out before many other people were able to. Um, Apparently she never liked thinking about who she may have left behind. So all I was able to know is that she was preemptive in how she got out. And you know, I thank her for that. I never was never able to meet her, but I thank her, and that's why I cherish my background, and I cherish the knowledge that she was smart enough to basically not fall into any soft words. Any word she heard was as hard as stone and as cold as ice. So she, with her then husband, and unbeknownst to her, my grandmother got up, got out, and then started a new life in Brooklyn. And then about three three, no, two months after my nana was born, the war started. So, sorry, not the war started. The Nazis took a full hold of the German leadership, and well, I guess we can literally say the rest is history because unfortunately it is. And you know, when it comes to the when it comes to World War II as a whole, that is one of the most impactful times in just history as a whole. There's wounds felt on Jews' side, there's wounds felt on the German side. And, this story as a whole, just Lenny's story, it meant a lot for me to really see unfold as a Jewish man because, I learned a little bit about her when I was in college and in school. And, it's, I'll bring this up in a bit, but it's very conflicting to try and observe her as an artist because
Yeah.
you take a look at her imagery. You take a look at
Yeah.
the way that she and her team shot at the Olympics. You look at the Triumph of the Will and any of her work. I mean, it
Yeah, you can't divorce her aesthetics from politics. It's one. Yeah, it's just one. You can't divorce it. And many people try to divorce it, but till today, think of Tarantino, and who praised her as one of the most important and best female artists ever. And you can't, because it's the best example is Leni Riefenstahl. She knew what she did, and she empathized all the time this kind of propaganda for a regime which was responsible for 60 million deaths in the very end.
it's and exactly, and it's I mean, I grew up in the during I grew up before the crash of 2008, and I still remember, growing up, World War II, black, white, Germans and Nazis were the bad guys, America and the Allies were the good guys. And as I've gotten older, I've known that while a lot of that is still true, the reality of the situation and the aftermath of it is very, very nuanced. Sure, Holocaust, bad, storming Omaha, good. There are the things that remain black and white. However, when it comes to the actual people within themselves, sometimes those things remain a deeply flawed gray. And, even then, you see how Lenny handled herself both during and after the war. You even her work with the Nuba people. You see some of the artwork that she took there. Some of it was maybe a little embellished, but it's she is a very controversial filmmaker for a reason. You like because Tarantino, in a sense, is unfortunately right. You see in this documentary that Hitler and his inner circle came to her to like shoot Triumphs of the Will, to shoot the Olympics, and she was given so much freedom, far more freedom than I think any filmmaker can be allotted today. And you know, you try to look at it from her perspective, which is you want her to condemn the Nazi Party. You want her to condemn the actions of these people, but at the same time, in her diaries, she was, treated well by Hitler. She was given control and creative freedom that I don't think any filmmaker has gotten since. And it's like you at least somewhat understand why she couldn't necessarily free herself from that immediately. If you were given keys to a castle and keys to a kingdom, and you were able to produce some of the most striking imagery of the 20th century, I mean,
Yeah,
it,
you can watch it in the talk show of the 1970s, how much she is still honored and treated like a star. And she wanted to continue her career, and that was not possible. That's why she went to Africa, taking pictures of the Nuba. But it was somehow she was stuck. You are right. She was stuck not only in her role being a famous director, but also in the ideology. And I see there's, well, I can't say, well, she was the greatest artist because for me, it's connected with politics, with the responsibility for a regime which was responsible for, as I said, for millions of deaths. And it's a bit naive to separate it because we are talking in the beginning about the continuity, about the topicality of a renaissance of the ideology and also the aesthetics. And so we have to be very precise in analyzing their means and methods, especially in times of AI. Every image could be just constructed, and we have to deconstruct and know how these images are produced. And Leni Riefenstahl is a good example to learn about propaganda and to learn also about the misuse of propaganda. So dealing with her, it's somehow a message out of the future. We have to deal with it. And that's why I made this film.
In an age where propaganda is becoming more and more blurred from news and information and truth, I do believe that Lenny's story is a very, very important one, both from that perspective and as well as a perspective of how to deal with, with the aftermath of controversy. And, I did see a quote when it came to how people talked about this movie. And there was one that stuck out to me, which was she was the original canceled artist. And I think that is a grotesquely oversimplification of uh,
Mm.
of of the situation, but it's also sort of understandable as to why that critique was given when you see how she handled herself, how she conducted herself. She denied everything right up until she died at the ripe old age of what was it, 103. Like she,
Mm.
and we go back to the nuanced area of her life. I think it was a cruel joke that she got to live as long as she did. But, that's the thing. She, as a person, as a filmmaker, needs to be studied because if we just bury our heads in the sand and just pretend that, no, she was bad, let's move on. You're gonna
Mhm.
eventually you're doomed.
Yeah, you're totally, no, you're totally right. I think we have to consider her as a human being. She's not a monster. And that's the challenge because somehow she comes out of the middle of us, of the society. And if we just stage a tribunal, putting her in a cage, a criminal cage, and then we can sink this cage somehow in the deepest point of the Pacific Ocean. That's not the solution. We have to deal with her. We have to deal with propaganda. We have to deal with the means of propaganda and the methods. And so we have to deal with Leni Riefenstahl. Maybe we have to get a better film education or media education to learn more about the possibilities of propaganda. But this film is just a beginning to deal with it. And I think it's a big chance. And I love to have the debates and discussions like we have. Yeah, that's what the film is. Somehow it's a starting point for all the debates that will follow. And I had a lot. I was traveling to many countries, Eastern Europe, close to Putin, the Baltic states, to Poland, but also the film was shown in India. So different aspects of propaganda, of the longing for authorities, the longing for simple solutions. It's something which is so topic, and it's a chance to look how these systems work with, or how they do work with propaganda. We don't have to look just to Xi Jinping and Putin. It's a phenomenon which is widespread all over. And it's a threat for the future. It's a threat for democracy. So we have to be alert.
And something that you did kind of bring up that I think is interesting is that propaganda has no political affiliation. Propaganda can be used by anybody. And Lenny's story is proof that, regardless of how you conduct yourself, regardless of who uses your work, it will always be used. And regardless of how you intend for it to be, or what even you intended it to be for, propaganda can't be escaped. No matter how hard you try to shake it, it will always be used. Now, I do want to thank you for your time. I would love to thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to view your work, as well as learn more about this controversial figure. I guess my last question to you will be kind of a two-parter. One, how can people observe this film? Where can they see it? And, at the end of the day, are you proud of the work that you have achieved with Riefenstahl?
Well, it's not a question of proudness, it's a question of concern. Why concern? It's something, it's for me, it's like magnifying the structures of propaganda and magnifying also the necessity to how to deal with it. With the means of propaganda, it's painful because it's a diagnosis of the present or the diagnosis of the future. And the huge response, we got a lot of spectators worldwide, and now we are starting in the US. We have a lot of media response, and it has something to do why this film is necessary, because it means to deal with the present yearnings and longings for, well, anti-democratic attitudes, for the supremacy of a nation, the supremacy of a race, the disdain, the contempt of the so-called sickness, the other, the migrants. And that's very present. And so it's a film about the challenge. And when you ask me, how do I feel with it, with the success of the film, it's very ambivalent. Of course, it's good to travel and to discuss it, but also it's a sign that this world is we are in trouble, in really deep troubles.
I couldn't have put it better myself. On that note, Andres, thank you very much for coming on Showverse today. To everyone else, if you have the chance, please take the opportunity to watch Riefenstahl. It is a truly eye-opening documentary that deserves not only your eyes and ears, but it deserves your overall attention as well. Links for more information about the film will be in the description below. Andres, thank you so much for being on
Yeah,
Showverse.
and I will be present at several screenings. Yeah, in New York, in Chicago, in LA, and San Francisco. I will be there in person, and will welcome and love the audience with all the debates and questions, and I will give some answers, I hope.
I you heard that first, folks. Please go check out any of these screenings. Andre is a wonderful, wonderful person to talk with and debate with. Andres, thank you so much for giving me your time.
Thank you too. Noah, it was great talking to you. Really, I appreciate it, your openness, and it's a pity we can't meet in person next time.
Hey, there's always a next time. Thank you very much.